I don't care what she looks like. I just need a woman who knows how to stay out of trouble." Cole Mercer said those words to the marriage broker on a Tuesday morning, and he meant every syllable. He was a rancher, not a romantic. He had no use for beauty or charm, or the kind of woman who made men stop walking on the sidewalk. He wanted steady hands, a quiet voice, and someone who understood that a cattle ranch ran on discipline, not feeling. What arrived on Friday's stagecoach made him question every decision he had ever made in his 35 years of living. If this story already has you hooked, please subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell and follow along with me until the very end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The stagecoach from Cheyenne was 40 minutes late. Cole stood at the edge of the Red Creek Depot with his hat pulled low and his arms crossed, which was his natural posture for almost every situation he'd encountered in the past 5 years. He wasn't nervous. He had told himself that repeatedly during the 2-hour ride into town. A man who had already survived the worst thing life could do to him had no business being nervous about meeting a stranger. He watched the other men at the depot, 2 merchants waiting on dry goods, a young ranch hand collecting a parcel, and he envied their simplicity. They weren't waiting for a wife. They weren't about to shake hands with a woman who had agreed through a series of formal letters to move to Wyoming and marry a man she had never met. Cole had spent 3 weeks composing those letters. He had been honest, maybe brutally so. He had written that the ranch was in poor shape, that the house needed repairs, that he worked from before dawn until after dark most days of the week, that he was not a sociable man and had no desire to become one. He had written in his 3rd letter the sentence that had embarrassed him, even as he sealed the envelope. "I am not looking for romance. I am looking for someone practical." The woman who had written back was named Evelyn Harper, 26 years old, from a family in Illinois, she had said. Educated, experienced managing household accounts. She had written clearly and without sentiment, which he had appreciated. Her letters were organized, logical. She had asked good questions about the ranch's water supply and the number of cattle he currently ran. She had not sent a photograph. He had not asked for one. That he now realized had been a significant oversight. The stagecoach rolled to a stop in a cloud of red dust, and Cole straightened up from the post he'd been leaning against. The driver climbed down from his seat. The door swung open. The first passenger out was an older man in a traveling suit carrying a leather case. The second was a woman, and Cole felt something shift in his chest, a physical sensation, like a board coming loose from a wall, because the woman stepping down from that coach was not what he had prepared himself for. Not even close. She was tall for a woman with dark hair pinned up beneath a travel hat that had seen better days. Her dress was dusty from the road, and there was a small tear near the hem that she had clearly tried to repair herself. None of that mattered. What mattered were her eyes, sharp and blue, and scanning the street, with the calm, methodical attention of someone assessing a situation, not admiring a view. She was breathtakingly beautiful, and she knew it, not in the preening way of a woman who traded on her appearance, but in the weary way of a woman who had spent years dealing with the consequences of it. Every man at the depot turned to look. Even the driver paused. Cole felt his jaw tighten. He thought with sudden, vivid clarity about everything he had written in those letters. Practical. Partnership. No complications. He thought about the kind of attention a woman like this would draw in a town like Red Creek, where gossip moved faster than horses and judgment came easy. He thought about his quiet mornings and his ordered evenings and the careful, manageable life he had constructed around his grief. Then he thought, I made a terrible mistake. She found him before he could decide what to do about it. Her eyes moved across the small crowd with efficient purpose and landed on him possibly because he was the only man not openly staring, which, in itself, made him obvious. She walked toward him without hesitation, and up close, she was worse. She smelled faintly of lavender, despite 2 days on a dusty stagecoach which seemed unfair. "Mr. Mercer," she said, not a question. "Miss Harper," he said, also not a question. They looked at each other for a moment. "I appreciate you meeting me," she said. "You're late," he said. It was the first thing that came out of his mouth, and he recognized immediately that it was not a kind thing to say to a woman who had just spent 2 days on a stagecoach. He didn't apologize, but he reached for her travel bag. "The wagon's around the corner." She handed him the bag without comment. He noticed it was heavier than expected. He also noticed that she glanced back over her shoulder as they walked. Once, then again. He didn't say anything about it. The ride out to the ranch took the better part of an hour, and they spent the first 20 minutes in complete silence, which suited Cole fine. He concentrated on the road. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and her back straight, which was not the posture of a woman relaxing after a long journey. It was the posture of a woman staying alert. "How many head of cattle?" she asked finally. "Little over 200, he said. "Down from 350 2 years ago. What happened to the other 150? Bad winter, supplier problems, some other things." He paused. "The ranch isn't in the shape I'd like it to be in." "You said that in your letters." "I meant it." "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "Your fence line on the east side, I could see it from the road when we turned. The posts are set wrong. They'll go down in a hard rain." He looked at her. She was still watching the road ahead of them, not him. "You can tell that from riding past," he said. "My father ran a farm," she said. "Not a ranch, but fence posts are fence posts." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing, but something shifted slightly in his assessment of the situation. One fraction. She looked back over her shoulder again. "Miss Harper," he said. "Evelyn," she said. "Evelyn," he said. "Is there something behind us that requires your attention?" A pause, brief but deliberate. "No," she said. "Old habit." He let it go. He didn't believe her, but he let it go. The ranch house was a 2-story structure that had been solid once and was working its way toward solid again slowly. He had repaired the roof the previous fall. The porch needed work. Inside it was clean but spare, a working man's house, not a home exactly. He had made an effort before her arrival, fresh water in the pitcher, a quilt on the guest bed, firewood stacked by the stove. She walked through the front room without comment, which he couldn't decide whether to take as approval or disappointment. "Kitchen's through there," he said. "Your room is up the stairs, first door. I'm at the end of the hall. The hands sleep in the bunkhouse, which is around the east side of the barn. I'll introduce you tomorrow. They know you're coming." She had stopped at the bookshelf beside the fireplace. She was looking at the single-framed photograph on the mantel. A young woman, dark hair, laughing. Cole did not say anything. Neither did she. She simply moved on to the kitchen, and the moment passed, and he was grateful for that in a way he couldn't quite name. "The books," she said from the kitchen doorway, meaning the ledgers he kept on the side table. "May I look at them tonight?" "Tonight. I'd rather understand the financial situation as quickly as possible." He looked at her standing there, in her travel-worn dress, with her hair coming slightly loose from its pins, asking to read his accounting ledgers on the first evening she'd arrived, and he thought, "Who is this woman?" "They're yours to look at," he said. "Thank you." She moved toward the stairs, then stopped. "Mr. Mercer." "Cole." She considered that. "Cole. I want to be straightforward with you. I appreciate that." "I will work hard," she said. "I will do my share. I will not cause you problems with your business or your neighbors if I can help it. But I need you to understand that I have no intention of being decorative." He stared at her. "I didn't ask for decorative," he said. "No," she said. "You didn't. That's why I came." She went up the stairs. Cole stood in his own kitchen for a long moment alone and tried to identify exactly what emotion he was currently experiencing. He decided it was probably something between relief and alarm, which was a new combination for him. Calm. He found the revolver the next morning. He hadn't been looking for it. He was carrying her saddle blanket from the wagon to the barn. She had arrived with her own tack, which he had noted and not questioned, and it fell out. A small revolver, well maintained. Loaded. He stood holding it in the early morning light. Then, he set it back exactly where it had been, folded the blanket over it, and carried the whole thing to the barn. He hung it on the proper hook. He went back to his morning work without a word. But his mind was not quiet. A woman traveling alone across hundreds of miles, glancing over her shoulder. Burning, he assumed whatever letters had arrived in that sealed envelope she'd kept inside her coat. Carrying a loaded revolver in her saddle blanket. Asking to see financial records the evening she arrived, not out of nosiness he now suspected, but to understand quickly whether the situation she'd landed herself in was survivable. This woman was not on a simple journey toward a new life. She was running from something. The question was, what? And the second question, the one that bothered him more, was whether she was going to bring it here. He introduced her to the ranch hands that morning. There were 3 of them: Pete, who had been with Cole for 4 years and was the most reliable man he had ever employed; Danner, who was younger and worked hard but talked too much; and old Walt, who said almost nothing but could predict weather and animal behavior better than most almanacs. Pete shook her hand and said "ma'am" with the careful politeness of a man who was reserving judgment. Danner immediately said, "You're not what we expected," and then went red when Pete elbowed him. Old Walt looked at her for a long moment and then said, "You know cattle?" "Some," she said. "More about numbers and systems than animals." Walt nodded slowly, as if this answer satisfied him. She asked each of them a question. She asked Pete how they currently tracked the individual herd counts. She asked Danner about the condition of the south water supply. She asked Walt what he thought about the fence posts on the east line. Walt said, "They're going to fall." She said, "I know." Walt looked at Cole with an expression that said clearly and without words, "This one's different." Cole looked away. The ledgers revealed the problem within 2 days. He had known there was a problem. Generally, the ranch was making less than it should. The numbers didn't add up the way they should, and he had attributed it to bad years and bad luck. But Evelyn sat at the kitchen table with the ledgers spread open and worked through them with the focused efficiency of a woman who had been trained to understand exactly this kind of document. On the second evening, she came to find him in the barn. "Your livestock supplier is stealing from you," she said. He looked up from the harness he was mending. "Say that again," he said. "Holloway Livestock Supply. The invoices don't match the delivery records. You've been billed for animals that were never brought in. 64 head over 2 years based on what I can reconstruct from the records you kept." She set a piece of paper on the workbench beside him, her own notes written in a clean, careful hand. "It's not careless record-keeping on your end. Someone has been systematically altering the numbers." He set down the harness. He picked up the paper. He read it twice. "You found this in 2 days," he said. "The pattern is deliberate enough that it's actually not that hard to spot once you're looking for it." She paused. "You weren't looking for it." "No," he said. "I wasn't." "I think you trusted people you shouldn't have." He looked at her. The lantern light was the only light in the barn, and it cast everything in warm amber. And she looked at him with those direct blue eyes and said it plainly. "I think you trusted people you shouldn't have without cruelty, without judgment, as a simple observation of fact." It landed harder than any criticism he could have imagined, because she was right. "What do you recommend?" he said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. "Stop using Holloway immediately," she said. "I can draft a formal letter documenting the discrepancies and threatening legal action. There's a territorial attorney in Cheyenne who handles ranch disputes. I read about him in the newspaper at the depot. We may be able to recover some of what was taken. And I can put together a new accounting system going forward that will make this kind of fraud much harder to sustain." He was quiet for a moment. "You learned all of this from your father's farm," he said. Something moved behind her eyes. Not pain exactly, closer to caution. "My education was thorough," she said. He didn't push, but he filed it away. Dad. Grant Holloway came to the ranch on a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks after Evelyn's arrival. Holloway owned the saloon on Red Creek's main street and operated half a dozen businesses throughout the county, which made him the kind of man who thought his ownership of things extended naturally to people. He was charming in the way that men who are always selling something tend to be smooth and warm and just slightly too interested in whatever you were saying. He rode up to the house in the middle of the day, which was already presumptuous, and he arrived with a bottle of good whiskey, which was worse. Cole was out at the south pasture. Evelyn met him alone at the porch. "Mrs. Mercer," Holloway said with a smile that had been practiced until it looked natural. "I heard you'd arrived. I wanted to welcome you personally." "We're not yet married," Evelyn said. "Miss Harper." "Of course. My apologies." He looked at her with the particular kind of attention that men like Holloway always deployed toward beautiful women, the slow, appreciative survey that was meant to feel like a compliment and always felt like something else. "I'm Grant Holloway. I supply livestock to several of the ranches in this county, including Mr. Mercer's operation." "I'm aware of who you are," Evelyn said. A slight pause. He hadn't expected that. "Well," he said, still smiling, "I wanted to extend an invitation. Red Creek holds a social gathering at the church hall on the second Saturday of each month. I'd love to introduce you around. A woman settling into a new community shouldn't have to find her footing alone." "That's very considerate," Evelyn said. "I'll discuss it with Mr. Mercer." "Of course." He looked past her toward the house with the practiced eye of a man calculating the value of property. "Beautiful spread out here. Land like this, good water, good elevation. It'll only get more valuable as the territory develops." "I'm sure," Evelyn said. "If Mr. Mercer ever considers any business arrangements, partnerships, or otherwise, I'd be glad to sit down and talk." "I'll pass that along," Evelyn said. Her voice was perfectly pleasant. Her eyes were not. Holloway held her gaze for a moment, assessing, and then his smile widened. "Well, I look forward to seeing more of you, Miss Harper." "Good afternoon, Mr. Holloway," she said. She watched him ride away. Cole appeared at her shoulder 20 minutes later, having seen the horse from the pasture and come back. "That was Holloway," he said. "Yes." "What did he want?" "To introduce himself," she said, "and to let us know that he considers this land valuable." Cole was quiet. "He's also the man who's been stealing from you," she said. "I know that now," Cole said. "He doesn't know that we know," she said. "That's important." Cole looked at her. "You want to keep it that way?" "For now," she said. "Until we're ready." He stood beside her, watching the dust of Holloway's departure settle on the road, and for the first time since she had arrived, he did not feel like he was standing in his own situation alone. The letter came on a Wednesday. It arrived with the regular post tucked between a seed catalog and a notice from the county assessor's office. It had no return address. Evelyn picked it up from the table, where Cole's ranch hand, Danner, had left the mail, and her face went still, the particular stillness of someone who has just seen something they were afraid of seeing. Cole was in the kitchen doorway. He watched her read it. He watched her fold it precisely in half, and then in half again, and then carry it to the stove, lift the iron ring and drop it into the fire without a word. She replaced the ring. She turned around. He was still standing in the doorway. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "Everything all right?" he said. He knew it wasn't. He asked it anyway. "Fine," she said. He looked at her. She looked back at him. "Evelyn," he said. "It's nothing that concerns the ranch," she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. He noticed the hands. He didn't say so. "All right," he said. He walked back to the front room. He sat down in his chair and stared at the fire, and thought about a woman who burned her letters and carried a revolver, and looked over her shoulder, and had somehow become, in 3 weeks, someone whose absence he would notice. That last thought bothered him considerably. He found her in the barn that night. She was sitting on a hay bale in the corner, not doing anything, not working, not reading, not tending a horse. Just sitting. Her hands were flat on her knees, and her eyes were focused on nothing, and in the soft darkness of the barn, with the horses breathing around her, she looked for the first time like someone who was exhausted all the way through. He sat down on the hay bale across from her. For a while, neither of them said anything. The horses shifted. Somewhere outside, an owl called. "You don't have to tell me," he said, "but I want you to know that whatever it is, it's already on my land. Which means it's already my concern whether you've told me or not." She didn't look at him right away. When she did, her eyes were bright in the barn darkness. Not from tears she'd shed. From tears she was refusing to. "My father arranged a marriage for me," she said, "before I contacted the agency, to a man named Gerald Rourke. He's 61 years old. He's a railroad investor in Chicago. He and my father have business interests together." Cole waited. "I told my father I wouldn't do it." Her voice was flat, controlled. "He told me I didn't have a choice, that as his daughter under the law, my consent was a formality." She paused. "He wasn't wrong about the law." "So you ran," Cole said. "I ran," she said. "I contacted the marriage agency. I found your letters." She looked at him steadily. "You were the furthest from Chicago, and your letters were honest. You said exactly what you wanted and what you didn't. You didn't seem like a man who would—" She stopped, chose her words. "You didn't seem like a man who would treat a woman as a means to something else." Cole felt that settle over him. He didn't know what to do with it. "These letters," he said. "The ones you burn." "From my father," she said. "Through an intermediary. He's been tracking me. He has men agents, he calls them. They find people." She exhaled. "They will find me. Eventually." "How much time do you think you have?" "I don't know." She looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry. I should have told you before I came. You had a right to know what you were taking on." Cole was quiet for a moment. "If you'd told me in the letters," he said slowly, "I might not have agreed." "I know," she said. "But you're here now," he said. She looked up. "And the ranch is in better shape than it's been in 3 years," he said. "And you've already found one man stealing from me, and I suspect you've found more problems than you've told me yet." He paused. "And you burned your letters in my stove instead of running again." She blinked. "You could have run," he said. "When the first letter came, you could have packed and disappeared." "I could have," she said. "Why didn't you—" She looked at him for a long time, long enough that the question started to feel heavier than he'd intended it. "I don't entirely know," she said finally. And then quietly, "But I think it might have something to do with the fact that you moved that fence line without being asked." He didn't know what to say to that, so he sat with her a while longer in the barn with the horses breathing around them and the Wyoming night pressing in on every side until she finally stood and straightened her dress and said goodnight. He watched her go, and Cole Mercer, who had asked for a plain woman and wanted no complications, sat alone in the darkness and understood that everything he had planned for his life had just changed completely, and that somewhere beneath the alarm, beneath the uncertainty, beneath the weight of what was coming, he wasn't sure he minded. Cole didn't sleep that night. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle around him, the old wood contracting in the cold, the wind coming off the ridge, the occasional shift of a horse in the barn, and he ran the conversation in his head, the way a man runs his tongue over a sore tooth. Not because it hurt exactly, because he couldn't leave it alone. She had run from Chicago, from a father who had legally arranged her future without consulting her, from a man twice her age who wanted her the way men like that always wanted things, not for what they were, but for what they represented. A transaction, a signature on a contract, and she had ended up here, on his ranch, in his spare room, reading his ledgers by lamplight and burning letters in his stove, and somehow in 3 weeks making his operation more functional than it had been in 3 years. He thought about what she'd said. "You didn't seem like a man who would treat a woman as a means to something else." He turned that over for a while. He wasn't sure it was a compliment exactly. It felt more like the lowest bar a man could clear, but she'd said it like it meant something. Like honesty plain and unglamorous was a thing she'd been looking for and hadn't expected to find. He got up before dawn and went to work, That was the only response Cole Mercer had ever had to anything that troubled him. Movement, labor, the physical weight of tasks that needed doing. He was in the south pasture checking the water line before the sun had fully cleared the ridge, and when he came back to the house 2 hours later, Evelyn was already at the kitchen table with the ledgers open and a cup of coffee going cold beside her, and she didn't look up when he came in. "The September invoices from Holloway don't match the October delivery records," she said. "And I think the October invoices don't match the November records either. I need to go back further." "How far back?" he said. "How long has he been your supplier?" 3 years, Cole said. She looked up at him then. The expression on her face was the expression of someone who has done arithmetic they wish they hadn't. 3 years, she said quietly. "How bad?" he said. "I don't know yet," she said. "But Cole—" She stopped. It was the first time she'd used his name without being prompted. Neither of them remarked on it. "It's going to be worse than I told you last night. I thought it was 60 head. I think it might be closer to 90. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. He looked at the ledger she turned toward him. She had made notations in the margins in her clean, precise handwriting, dates, numbers, discrepancies marked in a different ink. It was organized, thorough, the kind of documentation that took real training to produce. "You didn't learn this on a farm," he said. She met his eyes. A pause. "No," she said. "I didn't." He waited. "My father is a businessman," she said carefully. "I grew up watching him manage accounts, contracts, suppliers. I used to help him in his office when I was young before he decided that kind of education wasn't appropriate for a daughter." Her jaw tightened slightly. "I kept learning anyway, on my own." "He taught you well enough that you could catch what 3 years of professional theft missed," Cole said. "He taught me to understand how men cheat each other," she said. "He just didn't intend for me to use it against one of them." Cole looked at her for a moment. Something in him shifted, not the alarm from the night before, not the relief, but something steadier. Something that felt cautiously like respect. "What do you need from me?" he said. "Access to every record you have going back 3 years, she said. "And your trust. And time." "You have all 3, he said. She nodded. She picked up her coffee and took a sip and made a small face, because it was completely cold, and that small human reaction after the composure and the precision and the careful words made him want to smile. He didn't, but he got up and put a fresh pot on. She didn't thank him. She went back to the ledgers. He found that he didn't mind. The news about Holloway moved through the ranch like water finding cracks in stone, quietly at first, then all at once. Pete was the first hand Cole told, because Pete was the one who had managed the livestock deliveries for 2 years, and deserved to know that what he'd been signing off on was fraudulent. Pete sat on a fence post and listened to the whole thing without moving, and when Cole finished, Pete said one word. "Holloway." "Yes," Cole said. "I thought something was off," Pete said. "Counts never felt right. I told myself I was miscounting." He was quiet for a moment. "I should have pushed harder." "You did your job," Cole said. "Someone was specifically working to make sure the numbers didn't raise flags." "Miss Harper found it in 2 days," Pete said. "Yes," Cole said. Pete looked at the ground. Then he looked up. "What are we doing about it?" "We're building a case," Cole said. "Evelyn's documenting everything. When we're ready, we take it to the county attorney." Pete nodded slowly. "And Holloway?" "We don't tip him off. We don't change anything yet. We keep ordering the way we have. We let him think everything's fine." Cole paused. "Can you do that deal with him like normal?" Pete thought about it. "I'll manage," he said. "But I want to be in the room when it happens." "You will be," Cole said. Old Walt found Cole 2 mornings later at the east fence line. Cole was resetting posts, the ones Evelyn had identified on the first day, the ones that were going to go down in a hard rain, and Walt came and stood watching him work for a while before he said anything. "She's good," Walt said. "I know," Cole said. "Not just the books," Walt said. "Yesterday she was out at the north pasture, watching the cattle. I asked her what she was looking at. She said 2 of them were moving funny. Asked me if we'd checked for foot rot." Cole stopped working. "Had we?" "No," Walt said. She was right. Cole drove a post, hit it twice. "She notice anything else I should know about?" Walt was quiet for a moment. In Walt's particular economy of words, silence usually meant something. "She watches the road," Walt said. "Every morning, before most of us are up. I've seen her from the bunkhouse window, standing on the porch looking east." Cole drove the post again, harder. "I know," he said. "Expecting company?" Walt asked. "Maybe," Cole said. "Nothing for you to worry about." Walt was quiet again. Then, "She remind you of anyone?" Cole looked at him. Walt held up both hands. "None of my business," he said, and walked away. Cole stood alone at the fence line and didn't move for a while. She did not remind him of anyone. That was the thing. She was entirely her own category. The woman in the photograph on his mantel, Clara, who had laughed easily and never worried about anything, until there was suddenly everything to worry about, had been warmth and softness, and the uncomplicated joy of someone who trusted the world. Evelyn was precision and capability, and the particular kind of strength that comes from someone who has learned that the world is not to be trusted and decided to be stronger than it. They were nothing alike. And he thought about Evelyn standing on the porch in the early morning, watching the road east, and he felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Something that made him drive fence posts with more force than the job required. The second letter arrived on a Monday. Cole was in town for supplies when it came. He came back to find Danner standing in the kitchen doorway with an uncomfortable expression, and Evelyn at the stove, and a faint smell in the air that was not food. "Another one," Cole said. Danner quickly found somewhere else to be. Evelyn was stirring something on the stove that didn't need stirring. "It was addressed to me," she said. "I know," he said. He set the supplies down. "Same as before." "Different," she said. She didn't elaborate immediately. He waited. "My father is not, he doesn't threaten. He doesn't need to, he simply states facts." She paused. "He stated that he knows I'm in Wyoming territory. He stated that he has already dispatched representatives to locate me specifically. And he stated that the man I've—" She stopped, corrected herself. "That the arrangement with you does not constitute a legal marriage and therefore carries no legal protection." Cole was very still. "Is he right?" Cole said. "About the legal standing?" Evelyn set down the spoon. She turned around. She had clearly been thinking about this since the letter arrived. Her whole posture had the quality of someone who has been working through a problem and has not yet found the answer. "We haven't married yet," she said. "The arrangement is it's a letter agreement. It has some standing, but my father has attorneys. Good ones." She met his eyes. "He's right that it's not airtight." Cole crossed the kitchen. He picked up the coffee tin, put the pot on, and stood with his back to her for a moment. "Then we make it airtight," he said. Silence. He turned around. She was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. Not the composure, not the precision, something else, something uncertain. "Cole," she said slowly, "you don't have to—" "I asked you here," he said. "I asked for a partner. You've been one. That was the agreement." He paused. "I'm not going to hand you back to your father because he sends letters." Her chin lifted slightly. "You need to understand what that means. If his men come, then they come," he said. "I've dealt with difficult men before." "Not like these," she said. "My father doesn't send ranch hands. He sends lawyers and money and people who know how to make a situation look like whatever he needs it to look like." "Good," Cole said. "Then you know what they do, and you can help us stay ahead of it." She stared at him. "You want me to help you fight my father?" she said. Not quite a question. You've already been doing it, he said, since you walked off that stagecoach. Something moved through her expression. It was there and gone quickly, but he caught it a flash of something raw, almost stunned, like a woman who had been bracing for resistance and hadn't found any. She turned back to the stove. "The coffee's almost ready," she said. He sat down at the table. Neither of them said anything else. But the silence was different from the silences they'd had before. Jatan. Grant Holloway came back to town the following weekend, and this time he made his attention public. Cole was at the feed store when he heard about it from the merchant's wife. Holloway had stopped Evelyn on the main street while she was picking up thread and a newspaper, and he had spoken to her for 20 minutes in full view of everyone, and he had done it with the particular deliberate visibility of a man who wanted people to see. Cole paid for his supplies and drove home without hurrying. Hurrying would mean something. He was not going to mean something. Evelyn was already back when he got there. She was at the kitchen table, not the ledgers this time, but a sheet of paper she was writing on quickly, her handwriting moving faster than usual. "Holloway," he said. "He asked me to have supper with him," she said without looking up. "At the hotel dining room. He said—" She paused, set down her pen. "He said that a woman he said a woman who was clearly educated and capable might find the arrangements here limiting, and that he would be happy to discuss options." "Options," Cole said flatly. "He's not stupid," Evelyn said. "He's been watching the ranch. He's noticed the changes." She turned the paper so he could see it. She'd been making a list. "He came out to see me the first time because he's attracted to me. He came back this time because he's starting to understand that I'm the one who figured out his accounts." Cole went very still. "He knows," Cole said. "He suspects," she said. "He doesn't know what I found, but he's noticed that the relationship with the ranch has gone quiet. No new orders in 3 weeks. No response to his last delivery notice." She tapped the pen against the paper. "He's trying to find out what I know, and he's using social attention as cover." Cole looked at her. "That's a very specific read of a man you've spoken to twice. I grew up around men like Holloway," she said. "My father is a more sophisticated version of the same thing. Charm is always a tool. The question is what it's working toward." "What do we do?" he said. "Nothing yet," she said. "We keep documenting. We keep our distance without making it obvious. And we let him think the supper invitation is still under consideration." She picked up her pen. "Can you trust Pete to handle the next delivery interaction if Holloway comes out?" "Yes," Cole said. "Then we're all right for now," she said. She went back to her writing. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at this woman who had been on his ranch for less than a month and was already running a quiet counter-operation against 2 separate threats with the calm efficiency of someone who had been doing this kind of thing her whole life. He thought, what exactly happened to this woman before she got here? He didn't ask, not yet, but he thought about it all the way through supper. The 3rd letter didn't arrive. A man did. He came on a Thursday afternoon, a single rider, well-dressed in the way that felt deliberate rather than natural, on a horse that was too good for the territory. He tied up at the post by the porch and knocked on the front door like he owned the place, which was Cole suspected the intended impression. Cole answered. "I'm looking for Evelyn Harper," the man said. He had a soft Eastern accent and the eyes of someone accustomed to being underestimated. "I'm an associate of her father's. I have correspondence for her." "She's not here," Cole said. She was in the barn. She had come around the corner when she heard the horse taken one look and gone straight back. Cole had caught it out of the corner of his eye. He had moved to the front door without discussion. "You'd be Mr. Mercer," the man said. "The mail order arrangement." "That's right," Cole said. "I see." The man's gaze moved past Cole into the house assessing cataloging. "Mr. Mercer, I want to be straightforward with you. I'm here on behalf of Edward Harper, Evelyn's father. He's concerned for his daughter's well-being. He believes she may have made some impulsive decisions, and he'd like the opportunity to discuss them with her directly." "That's between her and her father," Cole said. "Of course," the man said smoothly. But I think you should understand that Mr. Harper has significant resources and considerable patience. He will locate his daughter. The only question is whether this process is cooperative or not." He paused. Uncooperative situations have a way of becoming complicated for everyone involved. Cole looked at him. "Are you threatening me?" Cole said. His voice was perfectly level. Not angry, just asking. The man smiled. "I'm offering clarity," he said. "This arrangement you've entered into, it's informal legally speaking. A letter agreement at best. Easily contested. Easily set aside." He tilted his head. "A ranch like this already under financial pressure, a legal dispute would be unfortunate timing." Cole said nothing for a long moment. "You've done your research," Cole said. "Mr. Harper is thorough," the man said. "So is his daughter," Cole said. He opened the door a little wider, which meant the conversation was done. "You're welcome to leave your correspondence. I'll make sure she receives it." The man studied him, looking for give, looking for fear, looking for the place where a quiet rancher would fold. He didn't find it. He set an envelope on the porch rail. "I'll be in Red Creek for a few days," he said. "If Miss Harper wants to reach her father, she knows how." He stepped off the porch. "Good day, Mr. Mercer." Cole watched him right away. He picked up the envelope. He carried it inside. He set it on the kitchen table without opening it. Then he went to the barn. Evelyn was standing against the far wall with her arms crossed and her jaw set. She had heard. The barn wall was thin. "Who is he?" Cole said. "His name is Aldrich," she said. "He's been my father's agent for years. He finds people." She paused. "He found me." "He mentioned the bank debt," Cole said. "He knows about the ranch's finances." "Yes," she said. "He would. My father investigated you before I ever came here." She looked at him directly. "I didn't know how thorough it was. I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing," Cole said, not harshly. "None of this changes what we're doing." "Cole, did you hear what I said to him?" he said. She had. He saw it in her face. "You told him I was thorough," she said. "Because you are," he said. "Now the envelope." She looked at the envelope on the table. She made no move toward it. "You open it," she said quietly. He sat down. He opened it. He read it slowly because it was written in legal language designed to be read slowly, full of formal phrases that meant simple things dressed in complicated clothes. He read it twice. Then he set it down. "It's a formal notice," he said, "claiming that your father retains legal authority over you under an 1882 guardianship arrangement that was never formally dissolved. It says you are required to—" He stopped, chose his words. "To return to Illinois voluntarily, or he'll petition the territorial court to compel it." Evelyn sat down across from him. She said nothing. "Is the guardianship real?" he said. "Yes," she said. "It was established when I was 17, after my mother died. My father said it was for my protection." Her voice was entirely flat. "He never dissolved it. He never intended to." "Does he have standing to enforce it here in Wyoming territory?" "I don't know," she said. "That's what frightens me. I don't know." Cole folded the letter. He folded it exactly the way she had folded her burned letters, precisely in half, and then again. He set it on the table between them. "I know a man in Cheyenne," he said. "A lawyer. I haven't used him, but Pete has for a property dispute a few years back. He's good." He met her eyes. "We send him this. Tonight. We find out exactly what we're dealing with before Aldrich has time to do anything." She looked at the folded letter. "That will cost money," she said. "Less than losing," he said. She was quiet. "You saved this ranch 90 head of cattle worth of money," Cole said. "Let the ranch return the favor." Something in her face shifted, not quite breaking, but bending. She breathed in slowly through her nose. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. He got up to write the letter to Cheyenne. She reached across the table and pulled the ledger back toward her, because there was still work to be done, and neither of them was the kind of person who stopped working when things got hard. But that evening after supper, when Cole walked out to the porch and stood looking east at the road, the same road Evelyn watched every morning, he understood something that settled into his bones with the weight of certainty. Whatever was coming was not a question of if anymore. It was when. And for the first time since Clara had died, Cole Mercer was not facing something alone. He was not sure yet exactly what to do with that, but he stood in the Wyoming night and held it quietly, the way a man holds something he doesn't want to drop, and he thought, however this ends, I am not sending her back. Not to her father, not to Aldrich, not to Gerald Rourke and his railroad money and his 61 years of believing that a woman's life was a line item in somebody else's ledger. Not while Cole Mercer still had a fence post to drive, or a letter to write, or a single dollar of fight left in him. He went back inside. He had work to do. The letter from Cheyenne arrived 8 days after Cole sent his. He was out at the north pasture when Evelyn brought it to him. She had seen the rider from the house and gone to meet him at the road before the man had even reached the gate, which told Cole everything about how tightly wound she'd been since Aldrich's visit. She walked across the field holding the envelope with both hands, which was the only sign she gave that her hands wanted to shake. Cole opened it, standing right there with the cattle moving around them and the Wyoming wind pulling at the paper. He read it once, then he handed it to her without a word and let her read it herself. She read it twice. 3 times. Her face gave nothing away while she was reading. When she finished, she folded it carefully along its existing creases and held it against her chest with one hand, and she looked at him, and what was in her eyes was not relief. It was the expression of someone who has just had a difficult thing confirmed. He has standing, she said, the guardianship. Partial standing, Cole said. In Illinois. The attorney says Wyoming Territory has its own statutes. The enforcement of an out-of-state guardianship arrangement on a woman of 26 requires a territorial court petition and a hearing. It doesn't happen automatically. He paused. And it can be contested. Contested how? Marriage dissolves guardianship, he said. Completely and legally. She was very still. He was aware of what he'd just said and the weight it was carrying, and the fact that they were standing in a field with cattle watching them, and it was not the moment he would have chosen for this conversation. But the conversation was happening, so he held his ground. We talked about making it airtight, he said. That's what airtight looks like. Cole, she said. Her voice was careful, measured. The voice she used when she was working through something and didn't want to show how fast she was working. What you're describing is a real marriage, a legal marriage, not an arrangement. I know what I'm describing, he said. You signed up for a practical partnership, she said. A quiet life. You were very specific about that in your letters. I was? He said. This is not quiet, she said. There is nothing quiet about what's coming. No, he said. There isn't. She looked at him. The wind moved between them. Why? She said. Not challenging, not suspicious. Just asking genuinely, simply asking the way someone asks when they need to understand something that matters. He took his hat off. He turned it in his hands once. A man's stalling gesture, and he knew it, and he did it anyway. Because you burned your letters in my stove, he said. And you moved the fence post before you told me about any of it. And every morning for the past 3 weeks, you've been standing on my porch at dawn, watching the East Road, and you've been doing it alone. He put his hat back on. I'm done watching you do things alone. She looked at him for a long time. That's not a romantic reason, she said. No, he said. It isn't. Good, she said. And then quietly, I don't trust romantic reasons. I know, he said. I don't either. She looked back down at the letter in her hand. She turned it over once. We should talk to the attorney in Red Creek, she said. About the process. I'll ride in tomorrow, he said. She nodded. She turned back toward the house. She had gone 3 steps when she stopped. Cole, she said without turning around. Yeah, he said. Thank you, she said. She kept walking. He stood in the field a while longer, listening to the cattle and the wind, and thought that a woman who had been running for months and hadn't thanked anyone for anything had just said thank you to him for offering to fight her father's lawyers, and somehow that felt like more than he'd earned. He went back to work. They were married on a Friday morning in the Red Creek courthouse, with Pete as witness, and old Walt standing in the back with his hat in his hands because he had insisted on coming, and neither Cole nor Evelyn had the heart to tell him he wasn't invited. It was a brief ceremony. The territorial judge asked the required questions. Cole answered them. Evelyn answered them. The judge signed the document and handed it across the desk and said, "Congratulations," in the tone of a man who performed this function regularly and meant it every single time anyway. Cole signed the document. Evelyn signed it beside him. Their signatures sat next to each other on the paper, and Cole looked at them for a moment. The way two separate things placed beside each other became something the law now recognized as one, and he felt something quiet move through him. Not the grief he'd expected to feel, not the hollow comparison to a ceremony he'd once imagined with someone else, something steadier than that. Evelyn looked at the document and then folded it and put it in her coat with the same efficient care she used for everything that mattered. Pete shook Cole's hand and clapped him on the shoulder. Then he shook Evelyn's hand and said, "Ma'am," and she said, "Pete," and he went red in a way that made Walt almost smile. They drove home. Evelyn spent the ride reading a copy of the Wyoming territorial statutes that the courthouse clerk had agreed to lend her, making small marks in the margins with a pencil she'd brought. Cole drove and didn't say anything, but he was aware in a way that was new and not entirely comfortable and not entirely bad of the physical fact of her beside him. Aldrich left Red Creek 2 days after the wedding. Cole knew this because the hotel keeper's wife told the feed store owner, who told Pete, who told Cole on a Thursday morning, with the particular satisfaction of someone delivering useful information. Aldrich had checked out. He'd sent a telegram. The telegraph operator was not a man who kept secrets well, and then he'd ridden east, Cole told Evelyn. She set down her coffee. "He's reporting back," she said. "I know," Cole said. "Which means my father knows," she said. "About the marriage." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment, processing, running through possibilities the way she always did, quickly, systematically, her eyes focused on something no one else could see. "He'll send more than Aldrich next time," she said. "I'd expect so," Cole said. "We have maybe 2 weeks," she said. "3 if we're fortunate." "Then we use them," Cole said. She looked at him. "I've been working on the financial fraud documentation, the Holloway material. I have enough to send to the county attorney, but I want more. I want it airtight before we file anything. If Holloway gets wind of what's coming, and he's connected to my father—" "You think he is?" Cole said. She paused. Just long enough. "I think it's worth finding out," she said. "The land, the mineral deposits. My father doesn't do anything without a financial angle. He arranged my marriage to Rourke because Rourke wanted influence with the railroad. He came after me here because I ran, but there may be more to it than wounded pride." Cole went very still. "Say the rest of it," he said. "There are mineral surveys being conducted throughout this part of Wyoming," she said carefully. "I read about it in the newspaper 3 weeks ago. The railroad is interested in expansion routes, land with water access and the right elevation." She stopped. "What do you know about mineral rights on the eastern section of your property?" Cole stared at her. "I've never had them surveyed." "I know," she said. "I looked at your land documentation last week. You own the surface rights. The mineral rights were never separately filed." She held his eyes. "Which means they're claimable. By someone who knew to look." The silence in the kitchen was a different kind of silence. "My father didn't come after me because of wounded pride," Evelyn said. "He came after me because I ended up on land that someone Holloway Rourke, the railroad some combination, had already identified as valuable. And a wife is easier to leverage than a lawsuit." Cole stood up from the table. He walked to the window. He stood there for a long moment. "You figured this out just now," he said. "I've been building toward it for a week," she said. "I needed the land documentation to confirm it." He turned around. "Why didn't you tell me when you started suspecting?" "Because I needed to be sure before I said it," she said. "Because if I was wrong, I would have frightened you about something that wasn't real. And because—" She stopped. Shorter pause this time. "Because it changes everything you thought this situation was. And I needed to be able to give you the full picture at once, not pieces of it." He looked at her across the kitchen, a woman who had been protecting him from incomplete information out of fairness, who had sat on a discovery for a week to make sure it was right before she handed it to him. He didn't know whether to be grateful or frustrated, and he settled on both. "Next time," he said. "Tell me when you start suspecting." "All right," she said. "All right," he said. He sat back down. "Tell me everything." The three riders arrived on a Tuesday in late August. Cole saw them from the barn before they reached the gate, three men as Evelyn had predicted, better dressed than the territory warranted. Two of them he didn't recognize. The third was Aldrich. He walked to the house. Evelyn was already at the window. "Three," she said. "I see them," he said. "The one on the left is an attorney," she said. "His name is Marcus Vane. He's worked for my father for 12 years. He's very good." "How do you know it's him from this distance?" "Because my father only sends his best when he's ready to end something," she said. Her voice was completely steady. Her hand on the windowsill was not. "The third man I don't recognize, but he's carrying something in the left inside pocket of his coat. Papers." Cole looked at her. "You can see that from here," he said. "I learned to read rooms early," she said. "The shape of a man's coat tells you what he's carrying." She turned from the window. "Cole, what happens in the next hour will determine everything. Whatever they say, however they frame it, do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. Do not let them separate us." "I wasn't planning to," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm saying it anyway." He held the door open. "Ready." She smoothed her dress once, lifted her chin. The composure came down over her face like a curtain dropping calm and complete, and in that moment, she looked nothing like the woman who had sat in his barn crying, or stood in a field asking him why. She looked like someone who had been waiting for this fight for a long time. "Ready," she said. They went out together. Vane did the talking. He was a precise man, thin, careful with his words, the kind of attorney who never said more than he needed to and made every word he chose do work. He introduced himself with professional courtesy, produced documents from his coat with the unhurried confidence of someone who had never lost in a territorial courthouse, and laid out Edward Harper's position in 4 sentences. Evelyn's guardianship, legally established and never formally dissolved, predated her marriage to Cole. The marriage itself was potentially contestable, as coerced given the circumstances of her departure from Illinois. Mr. Harper was prepared to pursue a full territorial court petition if necessary. He was also prepared, Vane said, with a slight pause that carried enormous weight, to make other arrangements preferable to litigation. "Other arrangements," Cole said. "Mr. Harper is a reasonable man," Vane said. "He has no desire to cause hardship. He's simply concerned with his daughter's well-being and with certain business matters that have become entangled in this situation." "What business matters?" Evelyn said. It was the first thing she'd said. Vane looked at her with the particular attention of a man recalibrating. "Miss Harper." "Mrs. Mercer," Cole said. "Mrs. Mercer," Vane said, adjusting without visible discomfort. "Your father's business interests in this territory are considerable. He has existing partnerships with several regional parties, and recent surveys have identified—" "The mineral rights," Evelyn said. Vane stopped. The third man, the one Evelyn hadn't recognized, looked up sharply. Cole caught it. Aldrich's expression didn't change, but his eyes moved to Vane in a way that said she knows. "Interesting," Evelyn said, reading all 3 of them. "So it is the mineral rights." "Mrs. Mercer," Vane said carefully, "your father is prepared to offer a very generous, My father is prepared to offer whatever keeps him from having to pursue this through a court that will require him to produce his business agreements publicly, Evelyn said. Because the agreements he has with Mr. Holloway, and with Gerald Rourke, and with whatever railroad interest is behind this survey, if those are examined by a territorial judge, my father's financial practices become visible. And my father does not allow his financial practices to become visible. The third man stood up from his chair. "Sit down," Cole said. He said it quietly. The man sat. Vane looked at Evelyn with an expression that had shifted from professional courtesy to something closer to genuine assessment. He was rereading her, calculating. "You've done your research," he said. "I was trained by my father," she said. "He was thorough. I learned from that." "Your father underestimated you," Vane said. "Most people do," she said. A silence. Cole watched Vane think. It was a visible process. The man was too controlled to show it in his face. But Cole had spent enough years reading cattle and weather and difficult men to see the adjustment happening. Vane had come expecting a frightened woman and an unsophisticated rancher. He had found something else. "What exactly do you want?" Vane said. Not to Cole, to Evelyn. "I want my father's guardianship formally dissolved," she said. "In writing filed with the Illinois courts and the Wyoming Territorial Court. I want the fraudulent livestock contracts between Grant Holloway and my father's business interests submitted to the county attorney. I want the mineral rights survey documents, all of them, turned over to my husband's attorney so that any claims against this land can be properly addressed through legal channels." She paused. "And I want my father to leave me alone." "That's a great deal to want," Vane said. "Those are my terms," she said. "You came here to make arrangements preferable to litigation. Those are the arrangements." Vane looked at Cole. "You're allowing your wife to speak for you," he said. "She's doing fine," Cole said. Vane looked at both of them for a long moment. Then he gathered his documents slowly and precisely and returned them to his coat. "I'll convey your position to Mr. Harper," he said. "You do that," Cole said. They left without the ceremony of arrival. Aldrich went last, and at the porch step he turned back and looked at Evelyn with an expression that was not quite defeat and not quite respect, and was somewhere in the difficult territory between them. "Your father is not going to accept this," Aldrich said. "I know," Evelyn said. "He'll try something else. He always does." Aldrich nodded slowly. "You've changed," he said. "Since Chicago." "Yes," she said. "I have." He left. The town turned against them within the week. It happened the way these things always happen in small places, not all at once, but in pieces. A conversation at the feed store that went quiet when Cole walked in. A look from the banker's wife at the dry goods counter. A meeting of the local cattlemen's association that Pete attended on Cole's behalf, from which Pete came back with the tight expression of a man who had heard things he didn't want to repeat. Cole made him repeat them anyway. The story Vane and Aldrich had put into circulation was elegant in its simplicity. Cole Mercer, a struggling rancher with significant debt, had pursued a mail-order arrangement with a wealthy man's daughter for financial gain. When her family attempted to ensure her well-being, Mercer had used the marriage to complicate the legal situation. The woman herself was, and this was the part Pete had the hardest time saying, possibly not acting of her own free will. Cole sat with that for a long moment. "They're saying I'm controlling her," he said. "That's what they're saying," Pete said. "What are people believing?" Cole said. Pete was quiet. "Some of them," Pete said finally. "The ones who never liked that she was smarter than their wives. The ones who wondered why a woman like her ended up here. It's easier to believe a story that confirms what you already suspected than one that asks you to rethink it." Cole stood up. He went to the window. He stood there. From upstairs he could hear Evelyn moving. She had been up there for 2 hours. He had assumed she was working. He realized now that she had probably heard Pete come in, had probably heard every word through the floor. He went upstairs and knocked on her door. "Come in," she said. She was at the small desk writing. Letters, multiple of them in various stages of completion spread across the surface. "You heard," he said. "I heard," she said. She didn't look up. "Evelyn?" She set down her pen. She turned in her chair. She looked at him, and what was in her face was not the composure, and not the precision, and not the careful blankness she used in difficult moments. It was something older and more tired, the expression of a woman who had expected this, had known it was coming, and was still not entirely ready for it. "This is what he does," she said. "When the legal approach stalls, he moves to reputation. It's faster, cheaper, and it doesn't require a court." She turned back to her letters. "I'm writing to 3 people in Cheyenne who know my father's practices. Journalists, a territorial legislator who's been investigating railroad land manipulation. And the attorney we used for the marriage documents, he needs to know what's been put into circulation so he can be ready." Cole looked at the letters. "How long have you been planning this?" he said. "Since Aldrich left the first time," she said. "I knew this was the next step. I hoped I was wrong." She picked up her pen. "I wasn't." "Is there anything I can do?" he said. She paused. The pen hovered. "Yes," she said. "Talk to your neighbors. Not to defend yourself, don't do that. Just talk to them the way you normally would. Go to the association meetings. Go to town. Be visible and be yourself." She looked at him. "You are a straightforward man, Cole. People here know that. The story vein is spreading only works if you disappear and let it fill the space. Don't disappear." He thought about that. "And you," he said. "I'll keep building the case," she said. "We need to be ready when they come back, and they will come back." He stood in her doorway for a moment. "The bank called in a question on the loan today," he said. "Not a default. A question. But it's starting." She absorbed that. "How much time do we have?" 60 days before they'd require reassessment," he said. She nodded. She picked up her pen again. "Then we have work to do." He left her to it. He went downstairs and told Pete and Walt and Danner what was happening, all of it clearly without softening it. Pete listened and said nothing until the end. Walt listened with his eyes on his boots. Danner opened his mouth twice and closed it again. When Cole finished, Pete said, "What do you need from us?" "Keep the ranch running," Cole said. "Keep your mouths shut around town, and if anyone says anything to you about Evelyn, anything you tell me before you respond to them." "And if they say it to my face," Danner said. His voice had an edge to it that Cole hadn't expected from the youngest hand. Cole looked at him. "You tell them the truth," Cole said. "That she's the best thing that's happened to this ranch in 3 years, and you'd follow her lead over most men you've worked for." Danner straightened up a little. "That I can do," he said. Walt put his hat back on, which was his way of saying the conversation was over and the work was beginning. On Friday, the bank's representative came to the ranch. His name was Cornelius Hatch, and he was a small man who wore his authority in his expression, rather than his posture, which was always a sign of someone who needed you to feel the authority before you could see it. He sat across from Cole at the kitchen table, with his documents arrayed in front of him, and he spoke for 7 minutes about reassessment criteria and collateral concerns and the current economic climate. Evelyn sat beside Cole. She said nothing until Hatch was finished. Then she opened the folder she had placed on the table. Before Hatch arrived, he had noticed it when he sat down, and had been aware of it the whole time, Cole could tell, and she slid a single document across the table. "Mr. Hatch," she said, "that document represents the recovered livestock value from a 3-year fraud perpetrated against this ranch by Holloway Livestock Supply. The documentation supporting it, invoices, delivery records, cross-referenced accounts, is filed with the county attorney's office as of yesterday morning." She slid a second document. "That is the corrected ranch account assessment for this fiscal year, reflecting actual production numbers, rather than the ones that were suppressed by the Holloway discrepancy. The ranch is not in the debt position your current records suggest." Hatch looked at the documents. He looked at Evelyn. He looked at Cole. "Mr. Mercer," he said. "Is this It's accurate," Cole said. "She's accurate." Hatch picked up the first document. He read it with the careful attention of a man whose profession required him to read numbers rather than words. His expression changed in the way that numbers always changed expressions, slowly, reluctantly, and completely. "Why wasn't this reported previously?" he said. "Because my husband didn't know," Evelyn said. "He does now." Hatch looked at both of them. "I'll need to review this with the bank's directors," he said. "There may need to be an adjusted assessment." "Take your time," Evelyn said. "The documentation isn't going anywhere." Hatch left with both documents and the air of a man who had come expecting to deliver difficult news and had received a lesson instead. Cole sat at the table after he left and exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. "You filed it yesterday," he said. "The county attorney." "I filed it the morning after Vane left," she said. "I was waiting for the right moment to tell you." He looked at her. "Evelyn," he said. "I know," she said. "I know. Tell you when I start suspecting." She almost smiled. It didn't fully arrive, but it was close. "I'm working on it." He looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had walked off a stagecoach 7 weeks ago, and in that time had dismantled a 3-year fraud operation, married a stranger to preserve her legal standing, built a counter-strategy against her father's best attorney, and just quietly saved the ranch from bank pressure without mentioning it until the crisis was over. "What would you have done," he said slowly, "if you'd married someone else, someone who didn't?" "I didn't marry someone else," she said. He stopped. "I read your letters 3 times before I answered," she said. "I read a lot of letters from the agency. Most of them were men describing themselves. You were describing a situation, what the ranch needed, what you could offer, what you couldn't." She looked at him steadily. "I thought this is a man who understands that a life is built on real things." Cole held that. "And were you right?" he said. She looked at him for a moment. Something in her expression did something he hadn't seen it do before, opened slightly the way a door opens when the latch finally gives. "Ask me again in a year," she said. But she was almost smiling when she said it. And Cole Mercer, who had asked for a plain woman and no complications, sat in his kitchen and thought that every complicated thing that had happened since that stagecoach had arrived was pulling towards something he didn't have a word for yet. He was starting to think the word might exist. He just needed time to find it. And time, suddenly, was the one thing they didn't have. Because the next morning, Pete came in from town with a face that had gone gray, and he said, "There are 3 more men at the hotel, and one of them is Gerald Rourke." Gerald Rourke was not what Cole had expected. He had built a picture in his mind over the past weeks. The 61-year-old railroad investor, the man Evelyn's father had chosen for her, like a piece of furniture chosen for a room, and the picture had been of someone heavy and self-satisfied, the kind of man who wore his wealth the way lesser men wore cologne. Too much of it, and you smelled it before you saw him. The man Pete described was different. Rourke was lean, quiet. He had arrived without ceremony, checked into the hotel under his own name, without apparent concern for who knew it, and had spent his first evening in Red Creek, eating supper alone in the hotel dining room, and speaking to no one. The hotel keeper had mentioned it to the liveryman who had mentioned it to Danner, who had come straight back to the ranch. Cole told Evelyn. She sat with it for a moment. Her coffee cup was in her hand, and she didn't drink from it. She was somewhere else, somewhere in the architecture of what Rourke's arrival meant, pulling it apart and examining the pieces. "He came himself," she said. "Yes," Cole said. "My father didn't," she said. "He sent Vane. He sent Aldrich. He works through representatives." She set the cup down. "Rourke came himself. That's different." "Different how?" Cole said. "It means this isn't just my father's operation anymore," she said. "Rourke has his own stake, his own reasons." She looked up. "The mineral rights survey, it wasn't my father who commissioned it. It was Rourke. My father is the conduit, the legal mechanism. Rourke is the money behind all of it." Cole pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Then who are we actually fighting?" "Both of them," she said. But we've been aiming at my father. We need to understand what Rourke wants specifically before the hearing." "The hearing," Cole said. She looked at him steadily. "The county attorney confirmed it this morning. The petition my father filed the guardianship enforcement has been scheduled for a public hearing. 10 days. Cole absorbed that. "You knew this morning." "The writer came while you were at the North Pasture," she said. "I was going to tell you tonight." He looked at her. She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "I know," she said. "I'm working on it." 10 days, he said. 10 days, she said. "Which means everything we have. Every document, every witness, every piece of evidence against Holloway and Rourke and my father. It all has to be ready and organized, and presented in that room." She paused. "And Cole, in a public hearing, the town will be there. The judge will be influenced by what the room feels. We can't just win legally. We have to win publicly." He understood what she was saying. The story vein had spread, the whispers in the feed store, the looks, all of it would be sitting in that room. "Then we go talk to Rourke," Cole said. Evelyn looked at him sharply. "What?" "Before he comes to us," Cole said. "Before Vane sets the terms. We go to him directly and we find out what he actually wants. Cole, that could—" "You said he's different from your father," Cole said. "You said he came himself without ceremony, and he's sitting alone eating supper and talking to nobody. That's not the behavior of a man who's already won. That's the behavior of a man who's thinking." He held her eyes. "Let's find out what he's thinking." She was quiet. He could see her running at the risks, the angles, the ways it could go wrong. "All right," she said. "But I do the talking." "I assumed," he said. They found Rourke the next morning at the hotel finishing breakfast. He looked up when they walked in, and he didn't look surprised, which itself was information. He had known they would come. He gestured at the chairs across from him, with a hand that was more patient than welcoming. Up close, Cole revised his assessment further. Rourke had the eyes of someone who had spent decades reading rooms and people and situations, and he was reading them now, not predatorily, but with the thoroughgoing attention of a man who made large decisions carefully. "Mrs. Mercer," he said. "Mr. Mercer." He nodded to each of them. "I expected you yesterday." "We needed a night," Evelyn said. She sat down. Cole sat beside her. "Of course," Rourke said. He poured coffee from the pot on the table, poured for all three of them, which was either courtesy or theater, and Cole couldn't tell yet which. "I want to say something before we discuss anything formal." He looked at Evelyn directly. "I did not know when I entered into the arrangement with your father that your consent had been dispensed with. I was told you were in agreement." Evelyn held his gaze. "And when did you learn otherwise?" "When Aldrich's first report came back," Rourke said. "The fact that you had run." He paused. "I am 61 years old, Mrs. Mercer. I have been married. I have had daughters. I am not in the habit of acquiring women." The word came out with visible distaste. "Your father presented this as a mutual arrangement. I have since concluded that it was not." Cole watched Evelyn process this. He could see her deciding how much to believe it. "If that's true," she said, "why are you here?" "Because I have a significant financial interest in the mineral survey of this land," Rourke said. "And because your father has tangled that interest with his personal situation in ways that are becoming inconvenient." He set down his cup. "I want to separate them." "Separate them how?" Cole said. Rourke looked at him. "I want the mineral rights survey conducted properly through legal channels with full compensation to the landowner at current territorial rates. I want it done cleanly. What I do not want is a public hearing that drags my financial interests through a guardianship dispute and a fraud investigation and puts everything I'm involved with in this territory under scrutiny." "The Holloway fraud," Evelyn said. Rourke's expression tightened slightly. "I was not aware of the Holloway arrangement when it began. When I became aware of it, I found it distasteful and legally problematic." He looked at both of them. I would prefer that problem be resolved before it becomes attached to my name in a court filing. Cole leaned back in his chair and looked at this man, this 61-year-old railroad investor, who had come to Wyoming himself, sat alone in a hotel dining room, and was now sitting across a breakfast table offering them something. Not friendship, not apology, something more useful than either. "You want to deal," Cole said. "I want to reach an agreement that serves everyone's legitimate interests," Rourke said. "My father is not going to withdraw the petition," Evelyn said. "No," Rourke said. "But I can remove my financial support from his legal effort. Without that support, his attorney's enthusiasm may diminish." He paused. "And I can provide documentation of the original arrangement between myself and your father. Documentation that makes clear the terms he represented to me which were materially false. That documentation in a court filing would be significant." Evelyn was very still. "You'd give us evidence against my father," she said, "in exchange for a clean mineral rights negotiation." "In exchange for handling this like adults, instead of a legal war that benefits no one but the attorneys," Rourke said. Cole looked at Evelyn. She was reading Rourke the way she read ledgers, systematically looking for the discrepancy, the number that didn't balance. "We need until tomorrow morning," she said. Rourke nodded. "Of course." They left. They didn't speak until they were outside and halfway down the main street, and Cole was certain no one was close enough to hear. "Do you believe him?" he said. "About not knowing I didn't consent," she said. "Partially. My father is very good at presenting arrangements. It's possible Rourke genuinely didn't know." She paused. "About wanting a clean deal." "Yes, completely. Men like Rourke don't wade into emotional conflicts. They find them untidy. He wants out of my father's mess. And the documentation he's offering," Cole said. "If it's real," she said, "it ends the hearing before it begins." She stopped walking. She turned to face him on the street with the morning traffic of Red Creek moving around them. "Cole, if we take this deal, if we negotiate the mineral rights separately and let Rourke extract himself, we lose the ability to use him as leverage in the hearing. We'd be going in with only what we've built ourselves." "Is that enough?" Cole said. She met his eyes. "I think so. I built it to be enough." A pause. "But I wanted you to understand the trade." He looked at her standing on the main street of Red Creek in the morning light, explaining the strategic cost of a decision that was as much his as hers, making sure he understood what was being given up, and he thought about those early letters. "I am looking for someone practical." He had written that, and meant it as a small thing, a settling thing, a way of keeping expectations low on both sides. He had not understood when he wrote it what practical actually meant, what it looked like in the body of a real person. "We take the deal," he said. She nodded once. "Then we have 9 days to make sure everything else is ready." She turned back toward the ranch. He walked beside her. The 9 days were the hardest work Cole had done in his life, and he had spent 5 years running a failing cattle ranch through Wyoming winters, which was not a gentle comparison. Evelyn worked from before sunrise until after midnight most nights. She organized the fraud documentation into a presentation that the county attorney described when he reviewed it as the most thorough amateur legal preparation he had seen in 12 years of practice. And then he looked at Evelyn and clearly reconsidered the word amateur and didn't use it again. Cole worked the neighbors. Evelyn had told him to be visible and be himself, and he did exactly that. He went to the cattlemen's meeting on Thursday and sat in the back and listened, and when a rancher named Briggs said something that wasn't quite an accusation, but was shaped like one, Cole responded in the same quiet, direct voice he used for everything, and said that if Briggs had a question about Cole's ranch or Cole's wife, he was welcome to ask it plainly, and Cole would answer it plainly, and otherwise he'd appreciate it if Briggs let the matter rest until the facts were public. Briggs let it rest. The county attorney sent a formal notice to Vane that additional evidence had been filed against parties connected to the guardianship petition. Vane's response, which the attorney shared with Cole and Evelyn with the careful neutrality of a man doing his job, was 3 pages long and considerably less composed than his previous communications. The Polish was still there, but the confidence had cracked slightly. Cole read the crack and felt something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but was close to it. Rourke's documentation arrived on the 6th day. A sealed envelope delivered to the county attorney's office directly, which was Rourke's way of making the transaction clean. He never dealt with Cole or Evelyn directly after their breakfast meeting, which was also very much Rourke. The attorney opened it in front of both of them and read it in silence, and then set it down and said, "Well?" "Well," Evelyn said, "your father told Mr. Rourke that you had personally agreed to the arrangement," the attorney said. "In writing. He produced a letter apparently, signed with your name." Cole watched Evelyn absorb that. "He forged my signature," she said, flatly. "No performance in it, just the statement." "That would be the implication," the attorney said, "which means the original arrangement was fraudulent from its inception, which means the guardianship enforcement is built on a fraudulent foundation." He looked at both of them over his glasses. "Mrs. Mercer, I believe we're going to be all right." Evelyn sat very still for a moment. Then she said, "What do we need to file before Friday?" The attorney almost smiled. "I was hoping you'd ask that," he said. The hearing was held on a Thursday morning in the Red Creek Courthouse, which was not a large room. It was full anyway. Cole had expected some attendance. A legal hearing in a small town drew people the way water drew cattle out of proximity, and thirst for something to talk about. He had not expected every bench filled before 9 in the morning, with people standing along the back wall, and a crowd outside the door straining to hear through the open windows. He and Evelyn came in together. She was dressed carefully, not elaborately, but with the precise intention of someone who understood that appearance was communication. Dark dress, good fabric, nothing that asked for attention, and everything that commanded it. She walked to the front of the room without looking at the crowd, and Cole walked beside her, and he was aware of the sound the room made when they entered, not hostile exactly, but watchful, suspended. Vane was already there. Aldrich beside him. 2 other men from the Eastern contingent who Cole had seen in passing, but never spoken to. They sat on the opposite side of the room, and Vane nodded at Cole with the professional courtesy that Cole was starting to find genuinely impressive in its consistency. The judge was a territorial appointee named Hargrove. A large, deliberate man with the face of someone who had heard a great many people tell him what was true and had developed over years a very specific radar for the difference between true and performed. He called the room to order and began. Vane presented first. He was good. Cole had never doubted that, and the structure of the argument was elegant. Guardianship established and never dissolved. Marriage contract of questionable validity given circumstances of departure. Concern for the well-being of a young woman in an isolated environment far from family. He did not say anything that was technically false. He assembled true things into a shape that meant something different from the truth. Cole watched the room while Vane spoke. He watched faces. Some of them were nodding, some were uncertain. Some were watching Evelyn trying to read her the way the town had been trying to read her since she arrived, beautiful, capable, too much of both things, which made people suspicious. Then the county attorney stood up. He spoke for 40 minutes. Cole had known the structure of it. They had built it together over 9 days, he and Evelyn and the attorney. But hearing it presented in that room in that order was different from knowing it. The attorney laid it out like a foundation being built stone by stone. The forged signature. Rourke's documentation. The fraudulent representations to all parties. The Holloway fraud, 93 head of cattle across 3 years, documented in full. The connection between Holloway and Edward Harper's business interests. The mineral rights survey commissioned without the landowner's knowledge or consent. The 3 years of systematic financial manipulation of a struggling ranch. The room changed as he spoke. It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, the way a tide comes in unnoticed, until suddenly you're standing in water. Cole heard it in the quality of the silence. The uncertain murmur that had been present when Vane spoke went quiet. And then it went very quiet. The kind of quiet that happens in a room when people are revising what they believe. Briggs, the rancher from the cattlemen's meeting, was sitting 3 rows back. Cole did not look at him directly. but he was aware of Briggs in his peripheral vision, and he was aware of the moment Briggs understood what had been done to Cole's ranch, and what it would mean for any ranch in the county if this kind of operation went unchallenged. When the attorney finished, the judge looked at both sides of the room. "Mrs. Mercer," Judge Hargrove said, "I understand you wish to address the court." "Yes, Your Honor," Evelyn said. She stood. She did not look at Vane. She did not look at the crowd. She looked at the judge, and then she turned and looked at the room, all of it, the full room, every face, with the directness of someone who has been asked to account for herself for the last time and intends to do it once and completely. "My father arranged my life without consulting me," she said. Her voice was clear, not loud. It carried. "He arranged a marriage to a business partner for reasons that had nothing to do with my well-being, and everything to do with his financial interests. When I refused, he treated my refusal as a legal problem to be solved rather than a human choice to be respected." She paused. "I want to be clear that I am not asking this court for sympathy. I am asking it for accuracy. The guardianship my father is attempting to enforce was built on a forged document. The legal claims surrounding this ranch are connected to a fraud that has been operating for 3 years in this county. And the marriage this court is being asked to question is the most honest arrangement I have entered into in my adult life." The room was absolutely still. "I am 26 years old," she said. "I am not my father's property. I am not Mr. Rourke's arrangement. I am not a legal mechanism or a line item in a business contract." She turned just slightly and looked at Cole, and for the first time in that courtroom, something in her expression was not composed. It was open, present, real. "I am a wife, and a partner, and I am exactly where I chose to be." She sat down. The room exhaled. Cole did not move. He was looking at his hands on the table in front of him, because if he looked at her right now, he was not confident about what his face would do, and he was in a public courtroom. Judge Hargrove looked at the papers before him for a long moment. Then he looked at Vane. "Counselor," he said, "the forged signature documentation submitted by Mr. Rourke, do you contest its authenticity?" Vane was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "No, Your Honor," he said. "We do not." Another murmur through the room, different from before. Cole heard Briggs shift in his seat. "Then the foundation of the guardianship petition is fraudulent," Hargrove said. "The petition is denied." He made a note. "Furthermore, the documentation regarding Holloway livestock supply is hereby referred to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation." Another note. "The mineral rights survey documents are ordered surrendered to this court pending a proper review of landowner rights." Vane said nothing. Aldrich looked at the table. "Is there anything further?" Hargrove said. The Eastern contingent had nothing further. It did not end with a bang. It never did in Cole's experience. The room began to empty slowly at first, then faster, the way rooms always empty once the thing everyone came to see is finished. Vane gathered his documents with the same precision he'd used to lay them out, which Cole found even now admirable. A man who could lose that cleanly was a man who had lost before and kept working. Aldrich stopped beside Evelyn on his way out. He looked at her for a moment. "Your father is going to be very angry," he said. "I know," she said. He's not going to simply accept this." "I know that too," she said. "But he'll have to use legitimate channels now. And in legitimate channels, the documentation we have is stronger than anything he can produce." She met Aldrich's eyes. "You've worked for him a long time." 12 years, Aldrich said. "Is it worth it?" she said. Not cruel, just asking. Aldrich was quiet for a moment. He put his hat on. "Good day, Mrs. Mercer," he said. But something in his expression as he walked away suggested that question was going to stay with him. The county attorney shook Cole's hand, and Evelyn's hand, and said they had done good work, which was the highest praise Cole had ever heard from a lawyer, and possibly the highest that kind of man gave. Pete was at the back of the room. He caught Cole's eye and gave a single nod, the nod of a man who had been with Cole through 3 years of difficulty and was satisfied with how this particular Thursday had gone. Walt was beside him with his hat already on. Danner was grinning, which was consistent with Danner. The crowd filed out. Cole and Evelyn were left at the front of the room, and for a moment they simply sat with the quiet. The particular quiet of a room after something large has finished. Cole was aware of how tired he was the 9 days of preparation, the nights of poor sleep, the constant management of a situation that had been building since the afternoon Evelyn stepped off a stagecoach, and he had wanted to turn his wagon around and go home. He looked at her now. She was sitting with her hands in her lap, looking at the judge's empty bench, and her composure was still there, but it had gone soft at the edges, the way composure goes when it has done its job and is no longer strictly required. "Evelyn," he said. She turned. "You all right?" he said. She considered that question genuinely not as a formality, and he watched her take stock of herself, the way she took stock of everything honestly and without self-pity. "I think so," she said. "Ask me again tomorrow." He almost smiled. "Fair enough." She looked at the room for a moment longer. Then she looked at him. "Cole," she said, "when I said it in there that this was the most honest arrangement I'd entered into..." She paused. "I meant it." He held that. "I know," he said. "I want you to know that I know what you did," she said. "These 9 days, the neighbors, the fence line, riding in and talking to Rourke, not once asking me to make myself smaller or quieter or easier to manage." She paused again. Her voice was steady, but something behind it was not. "I want you to know that I noticed." Cole looked at his hands, then he looked at her. "You notice most things," he said. "Not all men want to be seen clearly," she said. "I've never had much use for fog," he said. Something in her face shifted. That door again, the one that had opened slightly in the kitchen the week before. It opened a fraction further. "No," she said. "Neither have I." They sat for another moment in the quiet courthouse. Then Pete's voice came through the open door from outside, saying something to Walt that made Walt actually make a sound that was nearly a laugh, and the world came back in around them, ordinary and loud and present. Evelyn stood. She smoothed her dress. She picked up her folder of documents. She was already thinking about the next thing. Cole could see it in her eyes, the shift from finished to beginning the mind that never fully stopped. "The bank will need the updated assessment delivered by Monday," she said. "I know," he said. "And the Holloway criminal referral means we'll need to provide additional documentation to the district attorney's office, probably within the month." "I know," he said. "And the mineral rights negotiation with Rourke still needs to be formalized before..." "Evelyn," he said. She stopped. "Today," he said. "Let today be finished first." She looked at him. Then she did something he had not yet seen in the 7 weeks she had been on his ranch. She laughed. Not a polite sound, not a careful sound, but a real one, brief and genuine and caught slightly off guard, the laugh of a woman who had forgotten for a moment to manage it. It lasted only a second, but Cole heard it all the way through. "All right," she said. "Today first." They walked out of the courthouse together into the afternoon, and the town of Red Creek watched them go, and the story that replaced the one Vane had been circulating was a better one, truer, and harder one, and more interesting. And it moved through Red Creek the way all good stories move through small towns, faster than horses. And it did not stop there. The day after the hearing, Cole woke before dawn and lay in the dark and listened to the house. It was the same house it had always been. Same old wood, same wind off the ridge, same creak of the porch when the temperature shifted. But it sounded different now, not empty the way it had sounded for 5 years, and not tense the way it had sounded for the past 7 weeks. It sounded occupied, in the way that a house sounds when the people inside it have stopped bracing for something and started simply living. He got up. He went downstairs. Evelyn was already at the kitchen table. She was not working. That was the first thing he noticed. No ledgers, no letters, no documents spread in careful rows. She had a cup of coffee, and she was simply sitting with it, looking at nothing in particular, which was the first time he had seen her do exactly nothing since the day she arrived. She looked up when he came in. "You're up early," he said. "I didn't sleep much," she said. He put the pot on. He sat down across from her. "Thinking about what's next?" She shook her head. "Thinking about yesterday." She looked at the cup in her hands. "I've been moving toward that room for months, planning for it, building toward it, and now it's done and I don't—" She stopped, started again. "I don't entirely know what to do with the quiet." Cole understood that precisely. He had felt it after Clara died, not the grief which had its own terrible momentum, but the quiet after. The removal of something that had been organizing every hour of every day, and the strange, disoriented feeling of standing in time that no longer had a shape. "It takes a few days," he said, "to find a different rhythm." She looked at him. "You sound like you know." "I do," he said. She didn't ask what he meant. She already knew. The photograph on the mantel had told her the night she arrived, and she had never brought it up, which was one of the things he had noticed about her from the beginning. She understood the difference between things that were hers to ask and things that needed to be offered. He poured his coffee. He sat back down. And for a while they simply sat in the early morning quiet, and it was not uncomfortable, and that in itself was something. "The bank meeting is Monday," she said finally. "I know," he said, "but it's Saturday." She almost smiled. "Today first," she said. "Today first," he said. The letter from Edward Harper arrived 10 days after the hearing. Not through Aldrich, not through Vane. Directly in Harper's own handwriting addressed to Evelyn at the ranch. Cole brought it in from the post and set it on the table without comment, and Evelyn looked at it for a moment before she picked it up. She read it standing at the kitchen counter. Cole was at the table. He watched her face and read nothing in it. The composure was back fully operational, and he waited. She set it down. "He's withdrawing," she said. Cole looked up. "The guardianship, the legal claims, all of it." Her voice was completely level. "He says—" She picked the letter back up, looked at it. "He says the costs of continued pursuit outweigh the potential outcomes. That he wishes me well in my new arrangements." She set it down again. "He doesn't apologize." "Did you expect him to?" Cole said. A pause. Something moved through her expression. Not surprise, but a quiet reckoning with something she had hoped for and known better than to expect. "No," she said. "He's not a man who apologizes. He adjusts his position and moves on." She was quiet for a moment. "But he's done. The fight is done." Cole looked at her across the kitchen. "How do you feel about that?" It was the kind of question he almost hadn't asked. It felt too large, too open, but she had been honest with him consistently enough that he thought she deserved the same quality of question in return. She thought about it, genuinely thought about it the way she thought about everything worth thinking about. "Like a door closed," she said. "Not the way I wanted it to close, but closed." She picked up her coffee cup. "My father is not going to become a different person because a territorial judge ruled against him. He's going to find another arrangement, another leverage, another door. That's what he does." She looked at Cole directly. "But he's going to do it without me as the mechanism, and that's enough." Cole nodded slowly. "That's enough," he agreed. She drank her coffee. He watched the set of her shoulders change, not dramatically, not all at once, but in the way that tension leaves a body when a held breath is finally released. A millimeter at a time. A small private unwinding that she probably wasn't even aware of. He was aware of it. He was aware of most things about her by now, which was itself something he was still reckoning with. Holloway's arrest came the following Tuesday. The district attorney had moved faster than Cole expected. The documentation Evelyn had compiled was apparently so thorough that the investigation required very little additional work, which the DA's deputy described to Cole with the particular admiration of a professional for someone who had done his job for him before he arrived. Holloway was taken from his saloon at mid-morning, which meant the entire main street of Red Creek witnessed it, which meant the story moved through town before supper. Pete came in from town with the news and delivered it with visible satisfaction to Cole, Evelyn, Walt, and Danner, all of whom were in the kitchen for the occasion. Pete had clearly understood that this was information worth delivering to a full room. When he finished, Danner said, "Good," with a feeling that spoke for everyone. Walt put his hat on and went back to work, which was Walt's version of celebration. Evelyn said, "The civil claim for recovery of the stolen livestock value, we should file that within the month while the criminal investigation is active. The timing will strengthen our position." Cole looked at her. "The man was just arrested." "I know," she said, "and the recovery window is time-sensitive." She met his eyes, then reading his expression. "Or we can discuss it tomorrow." "Tomorrow," he said. She nodded. "Tomorrow." Pete caught Cole's eye across the table with an expression that said clearly and without words, "You're going to be busy for the rest of your life." Cole looked away before Pete could see what was on his face in response to that thought. Because what was on his face was not the alarm that sentence would have produced 7 weeks ago. It was something considerably closer to satisfaction. The mineral rights negotiation with Rourke took 3 weeks and produced an agreement that the territorial attorney described as fair meaning. Cole understood that both sides had given up something, and neither side felt they'd been beaten, which was the honest definition of fair in most circumstances. Rourke would have access to survey and develop the mineral deposits on the eastern section. Cole and Evelyn would receive a percentage of any yield, a formal land easement payment, and full control of the surface rights in perpetuity. Rourke came to the ranch to sign the final agreement himself. Cole had expected to find this difficult. The man was still the man his father-in-law had intended for Evelyn. And that was a fact that didn't entirely dissolve, because circumstances had clarified. But Rourke arrived with the same quiet self-possession he'd shown at the hotel breakfast, and he signed the documents with the efficiency of someone completing a business transaction rather than performing a social visit. And he shook Cole's hand and said, "You have a capable partner," which was not addressed to Evelyn and did not need to be. He shook Evelyn's hand on his way out. "I'm sorry," he said. "For my part in the original arrangement, I should have asked more questions." Evelyn looked at him steadily. "Yes," she said. "You should have." A pause. "But you came here yourself. Most men would have sent someone." Rourke studied her for a moment. "Your father underestimated you considerably." "Most people do," she said. "The first time." He nodded once. He left. And that particular chapter of the story closed behind him with the clean, definitive sound of a door shut by someone who intended it to stay that way. Spring arrived the way Wyoming springs always arrived. Not gently, not all at once, but in contested increments, warm days interrupting cold ones, until the cold ones finally conceded. The ranch changed with it. The new irrigation system Evelyn's design built over the winter, with Pete's labor and Walt's knowledge of the water table, and Cole's willingness to spend money on something he didn't fully understand yet, and trust that she did begin to show results in April. The pasture on the south section, which had been thin and unreliable, came in thick and green. The cattle moved differently on good grass. Cole watched them and felt something loosen in his chest that had been wound tight since the bad winter 3 years ago. The herd numbers climbed. New calves, better weight on the existing stock. Pete started talking about expanding the south pasture, which was the kind of conversation Pete only had when he thought there was something worth expanding for. Walt stopped referring to the north water supply as a problem and started referring to it as reliable, which from Walt was an extraordinary endorsement. Danner asked Evelyn to help him write a letter to a woman he was corresponding with through the same agency Cole had used, which struck Cole as both funny and significant. Evelyn helped him without making him feel foolish about it, which Danner clearly had been afraid of. The letter was, Cole suspected, considerably better than anything Danner would have produced alone. The neighbors came around, not all at once, and not with any formal acknowledgement of what they'd believed or said or allowed to circulate when Vane's story was in the air. People in small towns rarely apologized directly for the things they'd thought in the wrong direction. But Briggs stopped by one morning with a question about the irrigation setup, which was not really a question about irrigation, and both of them knew it. Cole answered the irrigation question thoroughly and didn't mention anything else, and Briggs went home and apparently told his wife that Cole Mercer's operation was worth watching, and the wife told the banker's wife, and the banker's wife began stopping to talk to Evelyn at the dry goods store with the genuine curiosity of someone who had revised her assessment and was interested in what she'd been underestimating. Evelyn was gracious about all of it. Not warm exactly, she was never effortlessly warm the way some women were, the way Clara had been, but genuinely engaged. She asked good questions. She remembered answers. She gave practical advice when it was sought, and kept her opinions to herself when it wasn't. By June, 2 neighboring ranchers' wives had asked her to look at their household accounts, which she did on Tuesday afternoons, with the careful professionalism of someone who understood that trust in a small community was built incrementally and was worth building. Cole watched all of this from a careful distance and thought about the word she had used in the courthouse. Partner. He had thought he knew what that word meant when he put it in his letters. He had thought it meant someone who divided the labor and shared the cost and kept a practical arrangement running. He had not understood that the word in its full form meant someone whose presence changed the actual shape of your days, not just what you did in them, but how you thought about them, what you noticed, what felt worth doing. He had not understood that until it was already true. The evening he finally said something about it, they were at the east fence line. It was late June. The light was the long, golden, unhurried light of Wyoming summer evenings that seemed to last longer than physics should allow. They had ridden out together to check a section of fence that Walt had flagged. Walt still flagged fence issues to Cole, but he flagged them to Evelyn now, too. Which was Walt's version of formal recognition, and the fence turned out to be fine, a false alarm, a post that looked worse than it was. They were walking back toward the horses along the creek bank. The water was running clear and steady from the spring runoff, and the grass was good. And somewhere behind them, a meadowlark was doing something complicated and pleased-sounding with the evening air. Evelyn was talking about the South Pasture expansion. She had ideas about the timeline, about when to move, which cattle, about a conversation she'd had with the territorial surveyor, about the property boundary on the creek side that had turned out to be slightly more favorable than the original documentation suggested. Cole was listening. He was always listening when she talked about the ranch, but he was also watching her the way she moved through the tall grass along the creek bank, gesturing slightly when she was working through a problem, the way her hair had come partially loose from its pins, the way it always did by evening, the way she was completely unself-conscious about all of it, because her mind was on the thing she was thinking, and not on how she appeared while thinking it. "Cole," she said. "Yeah," he said. "You're not listening." "I am," he said. "South Pasture, timeline, surveyor, creek boundary." She looked at him. "Then why do you look like that?" "Like what?" he said. She studied him for a moment with those direct blue eyes that had been reading him accurately since the first day and did not show any signs of stopping. "Like you're deciding something," she said. He stopped walking. She stopped a step later and turned back. The creek moved beside them. The meadowlark finished its thought and started over. The evening light did what Wyoming evening light did, which was make everything it touched look like it was worth keeping. "I asked for a plain woman," Cole said, "because I was afraid." She was very still. "I told myself it was practical," he said, "that I needed a partner, not a person I could lose sleep over, not someone I could—" He stopped. He was not a man who talked this way. He was aware of that. He did it anyway. "I had already lost someone, and that nearly finished me. And I thought if I was careful about what I let matter—" "Cole," she said. Her voice was quiet, not interrupting, just present. "I let you matter," he said. I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe the fence posts. Maybe the barn. Maybe the morning you told me you hadn't run because of something as small as me moving a fence line. And I understood that you had been paying attention to me the same way I'd been paying attention to you. He looked at her. I let you matter, and I didn't tell you because I didn't know how to say it without making it sound like I was asking you for something you didn't sign up for. The evening held them both in its long golden light. You moved the fence post before I told you about any of it, she said. I know, he said. You wrote honest letters, she said. When every other man in that agency was selling himself, you described a situation. Her voice was steady, but something beneath it was not. I read those letters, and I thought this is a man who will not pretend. And I had spent my whole life surrounded by men who pretended. She looked at him the way she looked at things she was deciding to trust fully without the half measure of caution. I let you matter too. I don't know exactly when. Maybe the courthouse. Maybe the barn. Maybe the morning you stood at the window after Aldrich left, and I could see you deciding that you were not going to let them have me, and you hadn't even asked yourself why yet. Cole looked at her. I know why now, he said. So do I, she said. The meadowlark started a third time, undeterred, committed to its particular song, regardless of what was happening along the creek bank, which Cole found obscurely appropriate. He reached out and took her hand. Not dramatically, just took it. The way you take something you intend to keep. She looked down at their hands, then up at him. This wasn't in the letters, she said. There was something in her voice, not quite teasing, but close to it, the new thing she did sometimes when she felt safe enough to let the precision slip for a moment. No, he said. It wasn't in the letters. She turned her hand so that their fingers were properly interlaced, which was a small adjustment, but a deliberate one. Good, she said. The letters were fine, but this is better. They stood by the creek in the long evening light, and neither of them said anything else for a while, and it was the most comfortable silence Cole had experienced in 5 years, which told him everything he needed to know. Summer moved into fall, and fall prepared for winter the way Wyoming always did. Bluntly, without negotiation, with the honest directness of a climate that had no interest in softening itself for anybody's comfort. The ranch went into the cold season in better shape than it had been in 4 years. The cattle count was up, the irrigation held. The fraud recovery payment from the Holloway civil suit arrived in October and was applied to the bank loan, with enough left over to repair the barn roof and replace the bunkhouse stove, both of which Walt had been mentioning in his particular quiet way for 2 years. Pete hired a fourth hand, a young man named Calloway, who was good with horses and learning everything else because the operation had grown enough that 3 men weren't sufficient, which was a problem Cole had not expected to have again. The house changed. Not dramatically. Cole was not a man given to drama, and Evelyn's aesthetic was spare and functional, but in the particular way that a house changes when it is genuinely inhabited by more than one person. Small things. A curtain she had made for the kitchen window in a blue that matched nothing else in the room, but somehow improved everything around it. Books on the shelf she had brought from a box she'd kept in storage at the depot. Serious books, histories and legal texts, and one novel about the American West that she had clearly read multiple times. A second chair on the porch. Coffee in the morning made by whoever came downstairs first, which varied by day and had become something unspoken and ordinary, and his. On the first cold night of October, Cole brought the photograph down from the mantel. He did it when Evelyn was in the kitchen. He carried it upstairs and put it in the drawer of his nightstand, not hidden, not discarded, just moved. Given a different place. A private place rather than the central place it had occupied for 5 years in a house that had been built around absence. He came back downstairs. Evelyn was at the kitchen table with the fall accounts, her pen moving steadily. She did not look up, but she said, "You all right?" "Yes," he said. She nodded. She kept writing. He sat down across from her, and after a moment, he pulled the winter supply list toward him and started going through it, and they worked at the same table in the lamplight, while the first October wind came off the ridge and tested the windows, and the house held against it the way a well-built thing holds against the weather. Solid. On a Sunday evening in late October, Evelyn came in from the barn with her coat dusty and her hair completely down, which meant she had been doing something active and hadn't cared how it looked, and she had that particular energy she got when she'd worked out a problem, brisk and bright, and slightly impatient to say it. "The north pasture," she said. Cole looked up from the harness he was mending. "What about it?" "If we move the fence line 40 feet east, which we can do, the surveyor confirmed the boundary we gain enough additional grazing to support another 12 head through the winter without supplemental feed." She sat down across from him. "That's a net improvement of about $80 over the season, and it positions us for a larger herd increase in the spring." Cole set down the harness. He looked at her dusty coat, loose hair, bright and intent and entirely herself, and he thought about the morning he had stood at the Red Creek Depot and watched her step off a stagecoach and thought trouble. He had been right, just not about what kind. "Move the fence line," he said. She smiled, really smiled. Not the almost smile, not the nearly smile, the real one that had been appearing more frequently in recent months and still had the effect on him of something unexpected, like a door opening into a room you hadn't known was there. "I'll tell Pete in the morning," she said. "Tell Walt," Cole said. "Walt will want to be involved." "Walt always wants to be involved," she said. "He's earned it," Cole said. She looked at him across the work table, and in her eyes was something that had been building quietly for months, since the courthouse, since the creek, since every ordinary evening they had spent in this kitchen with the lamplight between them. Something that was not the caution she'd arrived with, or the composure she'd needed, or the precision that had saved both of them. It was something simpler and harder won and more permanent than any of those things. It was home. Cole Mercer had written letters asking for plain and quiet and uncomplicated, because he had confused simplicity with safety and safety with peace, and had not understood that peace was not the absence of difficulty. It was the presence of someone worth facing difficulty beside. He understood it now. He had learned it the way most true things are learned, not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of fence posts and burned letters and courthouse silences and creek bank evenings and October lamplight, until one day the understanding was simply there, complete the way the sun is simply there when you step outside and have stopped expecting darkness. The woman he had never wanted had become the partner he could not imagine working without the presence that made the house sound different. The voice that knew the ranch's problems before he'd finished describing them. The person he reached for when the day's wait became real, and who reached back. Not because she needed to, but because she had chosen to, which was worth more than need had ever been. He had asked for a quiet life. He had been given something better, a real one. And on that Sunday evening in late October, with the Wyoming wind at the windows, and the lamplight steady between them and everything they had built holding solid against the cold, Cole Mercer finally understood that the best things a man gets in this life are never the things he thought to ask for. They are the things that arrive on a dusty stagecoach carrying a revolver, and burning their letters, and watching the East Road, and who stay not because they have nowhere else to go, but because they have looked clearly at everything this place is, and everything this man is, and have decided with full knowledge, and without illusion, that this is exactly where they choose to be. That was not luck. That was not arrangement. That was a woman making a choice. And Cole Mercer had spent the rest of his life being grateful she had made it.